1839, twins share one heart in medical nightmare. Mysterious Chronicle of the Forbidden. Special Haunted Edition, 1839. Shocking discovery reveals experiments that defy nature. Exclusive investigation exposes medical conspiracy that haunts to this day. Narrated by Margaret Thornfield, librarian who discovered archives that haunt her to this day. Brave readers, prepare yourselves to discover truths that have disturbed investigators for generations. For years, whispered rumors in medical corridors spoke of experiments that transformed innocent lives into living nightmares. What we discovered transcends the worst fears of human imagination. The case of Elizabeth and Eleanor Blackwood, conjoined twins from Virginia, exposes a sinister conspiracy that extends to the darkest circles of experimental medicine in 1839. This is not Gothic fiction. Every line has been verified through documents that should never have survived the passage of time. In 1839, while our society celebrated scientific progress, an organization known only as the Circle of Anatomical Unity conducted experiments that transformed innocent lives into anatomical nightmares. The Blackwood twins were chosen not by chance, but for characteristics that made them perfect specimens for sick obsessions with physiological manipulation. Terrifying transformation documented in photographs. Confidential documents obtained through our investigation reveal that Dr. Elias Montgomery, the sinister mind behind the operation, had developed procedures that forced impossible physiological changes. The Blackwood twins were subjected to surgeries that transformed two healthy young women into a medical aberration that defies explanation. Medical photographs, preserved in archives that librarians keep locked under 7 keys, show the demonic progression: surgical incisions revealing a single, shared heart in the first week, fused nervous systems in the second, unified circulatory systems in the third. At 19 years chronological age, the twins presented biological anomalies that continue to haunt medical literature to this day. Sinister circle funded by cursed families. Our investigation discovered that the circle received funding from industrial dynasties obsessed with the prospect of achieving immortality through profane science. Each experiment cost fortunes, paid with the suffering of individuals transformed into guinea pigs for diabolical ambitions. The rituals conducted combined experimental medicine with medieval occultism. The Blackwood twins were kept in underground cells decorated with alchemical symbols, subjected to ceremonies that mixed medical procedures with Latin incantations that made blood freeze in the veins. Corrupted authorities protect conspirators. Evidence reveals that municipal authorities, influential families, and corrupt clergy members were aware of the circle's sinister activities. Death records were falsified, families were silenced through dark threats, and any official investigation was systematically sabotaged by invisible forces. Dr. Harrison, the coroner who later developed night terrors, secretly documented impossible anatomical discrepancies: 2 bodies sharing one heart, nervous systems that crossed between bodies, circulatory systems that defied physiological explanation, physical evidence of manipulation that challenges scientific explanation. Nightmares haunt investigators to this day. Each person who investigated this case developed unexplainable psychological disturbances. Margaret Thornfield, the librarian who discovered the archives, began experiencing phantom pains corresponding to surgical incisions after reading the documents. Dr. Blackthorne developed a paranoid obsession with physiological anomalies. Professor Crow refuses to look at anatomical drawings since seeing the photographs of the Blackwood twins. Cursed archives reveal demonic methodology. Our investigation led us to the State Medical Archives, where we discovered evidence of systematic tampering suggesting supernatural intervention. Pages torn out with impossible surgical precision, stamps that changed color according to the light, signatures that seemed to move when observed peripherally. The crucial discovery came through carbon copies that librarians swore they had destroyed decades ago. These documents mysteriously appeared organized on our research desk one morning, as if invisible forces wanted the truth about the Blackwood twins to be revealed. Montgomery's diaries written in ink that changes color. Dr. Elias Montgomery kept records in ink that transformed according to ambient temperature, revealing hidden texts when handled. His notes, written in archaic English mixed with alchemical symbols, describe procedures that defy both medicine and physics. The Blackwood twins were identified in the records as unified specimens Alpha and Omega, a designation that reduced living women to objects of physiological experimentation. The selection criteria were disturbingly specific: twins with histories of exceptional health, both born during solar eclipses, considered biologically unified material. The anatomical unification essence developed by Montgomery combined radioactive elements with glandular extracts from preserved cadavers, creating a compound that the scientist believed could accelerate physiological fusion in living organisms. The injections were administered directly into the spinal cord during nighttime ceremonies. Photographs that haunt those who observe them. The photographic series attached to the reports documents a transformation that haunts anyone who dares look at the images for more than a few seconds. The initial photographs show Elizabeth and Eleanor as radiant young women with innocent smiles. The subsequent images record a deterioration that seems to continue even after the photographer's death. First week, surgical incisions revealing a single, shared heart as if time accelerated only there. Second week, nervous systems begin to fuse, forming patterns reminiscent of maps of places that don't exist. Third week, eyes develop a synchronicity that reflects images of people who have already died. Fourth week, the twins present the appearance of a biological anomaly that has lived centuries of suffering. The most disturbing aspect was that the minds of the women remained intact within the transformed bodies. Psychological records document the Blackwood twins crying for their mother with voices that spoke in perfect unison, creating an existential contradiction that tormented even the most hardened executors. National Network of Haunted Laboratories. Intercepted correspondence reveals that Montgomery did not operate in isolation. The Circle maintained a network of collaborators in at least 8 states, all conducting variations of the same experiments in laboratories that were subsequently abandoned due to unexplainable manifestations. Each laboratory received funding from local industrial groups, creating a national conspiracy of exploitation disguised as revolutionary physiological research. The total number of victims may reach hundreds, all sacrificed on the altar of scientific ambition corrupted by obsession with physiological impossibilities. Financial records show that each experiment cost fortunes provided by families who subsequently suffered inexplicable generational curses, premature deaths, accelerated aging, early dementia. As if participation in the conspiracy brought temporal retribution. Underground facilities where physiology behaves strangely. The Blackwood twins were kept in an underground complex built 3 floors below the main hospital. Modern visitors report that medical instruments malfunction in the location, physical pains manifest temporarily after prolonged stays, and mirrors reflect distorted versions of those who observe them. The environment combined medical equipment with alchemical symbols engraved on copper plates that oxidize and restore cyclically. Temperature fluctuates independently of heating systems, and there are reports of whispers in dead languages echoing during new moon dawns. Unified physiological essence transfer, theory that haunts science. Technical documents reveal that experiments with the Blackwood twins were part of a much more sinister and comprehensive project. The Circle had developed a pseudoscientific theory called unified physiological essence transfer, combining experimental medicine with occultism in a way that defies rational comprehension. The central hypothesis suggested that the process of physiological unification could be extracted from one person and concentrated in substances administrable to others through specific rituals conducted during medical procedures. Montgomery believed he was distilling unification into elixirs of biological impossibility. Underground laboratory where physiology behaves abnormally. The Blackwood twins were kept in a specially constructed cell where physical laws seemed altered. Medical instruments functioned at different accuracies depending on location in the room, tissues grew and died in accelerated cycles, and photographs revealed that images changed independently of the subjects photographed. The environment combined state-of-the-art medical equipment with alchemical symbols that glowed with their own phosphorescence during experiments. Temperature was controlled not by thermostats, but by lunar phases, and lighting was provided by candles made with substances that made shadows move against the direction of light. During weekly rituals, the twins were positioned in the center of a circle engraved on the floor while Montgomery and assistants recited incantations that made air vibrate with frequencies that caused physiological disorientation. Simultaneously, the women were subjected to procedures that included spinal fluid drainage and injections of radioactive substances. Development of impossible physiological capabilities. Records document that the Blackwood twins developed abilities that defy physiological science during experiments. Montgomery observed episodes where the women demonstrated knowledge shared without verbal communication, spoke in perfect unison without visual cues, and showed comprehension of biological concepts that did not exist. Most disturbing were the physiological projections recorded. The twins began to describe their biological existence in different states simultaneously, as if existing in multiple physiological states. Montgomery interpreted manifestations as evidence that experiments were expanding the physiological boundaries of the specimens. Existential suffering documented in psychological reports. Medical photographs show the Blackwood twins developing simultaneously characteristics of multiple physiological states, shared organs with separate consciousness, unified circulation with distinct nervous responses, shared perception with individual thoughts. It was a biological contradiction that transformed existence into a constant physiological nightmare. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, a nurse who subsequently developed selective amnesia about the period, wrote in her diary, "Every night I hear the twins cry in the basement. They are not the tears of separate women nor the sounds of a unified being, but lamentations of someone who exists in all physiological states simultaneously." The anatomical culmination ritual, cursed final ceremony. Experiments reached their climax during a ceremony that Montgomery called the anatomical culmination ritual. During a procedure that extended for 3 consecutive nights, the Blackwood twins were subjected to the final process, complete extraction of what the scientist believed to be concentrated unified essence. The objective was to collect a substance that Montgomery theorized contained unified physiological experience compressed into one essence. This essence would be refined and administered to paying members of the circle as an elixir that promised not only physiological impossibilities, but control over personal biological barriers. The last medical records of the Blackwood twins are too disturbing for complete description. The women, at 19 chronological years, presented characteristics of biological impossibility, but maintained consciousness that existed simultaneously in multiple physiological states until the final moment. Supernatural consequences haunt participants. Professor Edmund Crowe, a specialist in historical secret societies, developed a disturbing theory. The circle of anatomical unity was not just manipulating biology, it was altering local physiological structure. Experiments may have created an anomaly that continues to affect anyone who investigates the case. Evidence of this theory: every investigator who studied the archives of the Blackwood twins developed symptoms of temporary physiological anomalies, nightmares involving multiple versions of themselves, and distorted perception of their own physical boundaries. As if knowledge of the case caused physiological contamination. Haunted survivors break decades of terrified silence. Our investigation managed to locate 3 survivors who witnessed events of 1839, all of whom developed psychological disturbances that persist decades later. Their accounts, collected in interviews that needed to be interrupted multiple times due to episodes of panic, reveal details that no official document recorded. Eleanor Whitmore, nurse who developed sympathetic pains. Eleanor Whitmore, now with phantom pains at 73 years of age, was a young trainee during the period of the experiments. She received us only after we presented specific credentials, and kept all windows closed during the interview, claiming that daylight makes her remember what she saw. I was only 16, Eleanor recalled with a voice that oscillated between youthful timbre and elderly tremor, but I immediately realized that something was altering physiology in the hospital. There were corridors where patients reported impossible pains, sounds of cries that seemed to come from multiple bodies simultaneously. Eleanor was the only person outside Montgomery's team who directly witnessed the Blackwood twins during their physiological transformation. One night, working beyond her schedule, she accidentally witnessed a ritual through a basement window and was never the same. What I saw changed not only my life, but my perception of physical limitations, she continued, her hands trembling with a rhythm that did not correspond to chronological age. Hooded men, candles that burned with flames that moved against the wind, and in the center two women who existed in multiple physiological states simultaneously. Thomas Harrison, son of the cursed coroner. Thomas Harrison, 85 years old who appears to have 50, inherited not only his father's secret notes, but also a curse that affects the family's physiological perception. Medical instruments in his home function at different accuracies, and old photographs show him aging at an inconsistent rate. My father knew that experiments were altering local physiological structure, Thomas explained during an interview that lasted simultaneously 2 hours and 6 hours depending on the clock consulted. He found bodies with impossible physiological characteristics. Dr. Harrison had secretly photographed victims, including the Blackwood twins. Images show contradictions that persist decades later. When observed quickly, they show normal women; when contemplated longer, they reveal biological impossibilities; when photographed again, they appear different with each revelation. My father suspected that Montgomery had discovered how to manipulate biological barriers, Thomas added. He found evidence that cells functioned independently of the body, as if each part existed in a different physiological state. Sarah Caldwell, survivor with fragmented physiological memories. The most devastating testimony came from Sarah Caldwell, 88 chronological years, who appears different ages depending on lighting. At 19, she was selected for the program but managed to escape before the final procedures, though not without permanent physiological consequences. Sarah still exhibits physical anomalies, pains that alternate between locations according to seasons, scars that appear and disappear, and reflections in mirrors that show versions with different physiological characteristics. Her memories exist simultaneously in multiple physiological states. They kept us in cells where physiology functioned strangely, Sarah recalled in the presence of her grandson, who observed uneasily how her appearance changed during the conversation. There were other twins, perhaps 10 or 12 pairs. The Blackwoods were in the adjacent cell, and I heard not only their current cries, but echoes of cries from all the physiological states they would experience. Sarah described rituals where twins were forced to participate in ceremonies that mixed medicine with physiological manipulation. Men in white chose different twins each night. When they took the Blackwoods, they returned existing in multiple physiological states simultaneously. Final moments of the Blackwood twins, fragmented physiological existence. Sarah's most disturbing description involves the final moments of the Blackwood twins. They had become something that defies description: 2 women, 1 heart, unified and separate, existing in the same bodies. One night I heard not only screams coming from their cell, but temporal echoes of all the moments of their lives happening simultaneously. Dr. Margaret Thornfield, who interviewed Sarah decades later using regressive hypnosis, confirmed authenticity through details that coincide with never-published documents. Sarah's memories show physiological fragmentation that persists to this day. She literally remembers biological impossibilities. Physiological curse pursues investigators. All testimonies converge. investigating the case of the Blackwood twins causes physiological contamination in researchers. Each person who studies the archives develops similar symptoms: distorted perception of physical boundaries, irregular physiological responses, memories of biological states they never experienced. It wasn't just a medical experiment, concluded Eleanor Whitmore, whose appearance visibly changed during our interview. It was a rupture in the physiological structure that continues to affect anyone who approaches the truth about what they did with those twins. Physiological curse remains active, investigation ends in terror. Our 2-year investigation revealed truths that not only shook our sanity but altered our fundamental perception of physiological reality. The Circle of Anatomical Unity did not merely conduct experiments, it created an anomaly that persists, haunting anyone who dares investigate the case of the Blackwood twins. Dr. Elias Montgomery never faced earthly justice. Records suggest that he may have discovered how to prolong existence indefinitely through physiological manipulation, possibly still existing today at an impossible age. Some investigators report sightings of a man who corresponds to his description, always appearing to be exactly the same age. The Blackwood twins, existence that transcends death. Officially, the Blackwood twins died in 1839. Unofficially, multiple witnesses report manifestations suggesting they may exist simultaneously in multiple physiological states. Visitors to the old hospital location describe encounters with twin women who appear to be the Blackwoods, always asking in perfect unison, "Do you think we share the same heart?" Location remains haunted by physiological anomaly. Today, the ruins of Virginia State Hospital are avoided by local residents who report inexplicable phenomena, medical instruments that function at different accuracies, shadows that move against the direction of the sun, and whispers of voices that speak about physiological states that make no sense. Margaret Thornfield, librarian who discovered archives that haunt her to this day. Final warning: this investigation ends here for reasons of personal sanity. Remaining archives will be permanently sealed. We recommend readers avoid investigating this case, as knowledge may cause irreversible physiological contamination. Temporal contamination possible. 3 investigators who studied this case developed unexplainable irregular physiological anomalies. If this content does not receive massive engagement, algorithms will permanently bury revelations like this. Your interaction may be the last chance for others to discover physiological truths before they are lost forever.